With every star, we are.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's the Jason Stapleton program, broadcasting. We're recorded today from very hot, 115 degrees, Scottsdale, Arizona. Don't worry about me, though. I got the AC, so it's all right. Today, as you guys know, we're rounding out a three-part series. We've been talking, on Monday, we talked a little bit about the opportunity that exists in this great transition, all the negative stuff that we've been talking about, and people unemployed and high gas prices and inflation. It's easy to get wrapped up in all the negative, but there's a massive amount of good stuff happening right now. And then on Wednesday, we went a little bit deeper into talking about how you might go about creating this sort of nomadic lifestyle. And I wanted to bring in somebody because, as you guys know, I can work from anywhere. We do work from anywhere, but I kind of have a home base. But there are people out there who legit work all over the world, and they kind of bounce around to wherever they want to, and they bring the work with them. They have true income mobility. And one of the big questions is how do you create that, or how do you even get started doing something like that if that's a passion of yours? And so I went out, I just found a guy who does that for a living. He's a guy who helps people find jobs remotely and work nomadically. His name's Sharon Koifman, and welcome, man. It's Koifman, right? It's not Koifman or something weird like that?
It's Sharon Koifman. As weird like that, exactly weird like that.
I couldn't have done it more wrong. I couldn't have done it more wrong.
Yes. And I added the extra weirdness from the beginning. Already awkwardness. I love it.
Right on. Awesome. Well, that's great. Well, first of all, thanks for being here, and thanks for talking with me about this, because I actually have questions too. I talk about income mobility as part of kind of a three-legged stool for people today, which is, control the source of your income, make it mobile, that kind of stuff. And so talk to me a little bit about what you guys do and how you got started in that. Did you start out working nomadically and then just decided, hey, I want to help other people do the same thing? Or did you just see a need that you could fill?
So I ran a web hosting company and an outsourcing company about 20 years ago. And the idea back then of going to India and finding very affordable employees was a new idea. Now it's not a big deal anymore, but back then it was pretty exciting. And I was providing that solutions for mom and pop shops or real estate companies that needed some web design. But what I discovered after a while, what happened that some other technology companies or software or web design companies would come to me to outsource their project because of cheap labor. And I felt that was a little bit of a business sin, because people pay those technology companies to implement their processes, their methodologies, and the concept that they literally go, okay, we got the client, but we're going to give it to somebody who works completely different on the other side of the world, was pretty bad. So when I sold my first company, my next focus was really about just let's try to find a solution that makes sense. And that solution was get the right people and get them to work directly focused and to those technology companies. And that's what we're doing till today. We're all about providing career-driven, focused people. We're headhunters across the world, trying to get people from established companies and entice them with a remote job, and hopefully get the clients much better people, much faster at a great value.
Yeah, and so the website's called distantjobs.com. If anybody wants to check it out, I'll leave a link in the show notes. But how is this still something? I get the feeling, especially with guys like Elon Musk, and who have said basically, and it's a weird thing with Elon, because the guy, I get it that he's a little autistic, and that he works like a dog, but the idea that most of the work had got to be in his business has got to be a remote work job. It's got to be at least 90% remote, and he's asking everybody to come back in the office. What is the feeling from companies that you get about true remote workers, guys who not hybrid workers, but people who are not coming into the gig at all, and they never really see or meet? Is there I imagine it's greater than it used to be, but is it something that is still a difficult sell?
So that's the thing. I thought the COVID will end the discussion. I really thought my biggest sales pitch for years was to explain, not to sell my services, which I think are pretty exceptional, but just to sell the idea of hiring remote, it's still a legitimate challenge. And then COVID came, and I said, okay, I don't need to explain it anymore. But then that entire experience moved to, okay, we understand that we need to let people work from home because we're potentially going to lose them, but I still want them near the office. I still want it to be hybrid. So they're not taking advantage of this incredible pool of talent that the world has to offer. They're just sticking to this. Okay, I got to do this because I don't want to lose my clients, but and my candidates, my people, but I still like people in the office.
Hmm.
So the majority of people still do not understand the incredible value for the company, and there's plenty of research that shows that people that work remotely are more productive, are happier, are more independent. It benefits the company. It doesn't just benefit the people. But companies are slow to absorb this, and a lot of them have the philosophy that the company work. Why fix something that was not broken? Even if I do believe that it's very broken.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the problem is I don't think people realize. I think that prior to COVID, what people thought was it won't work. You can't have they just won't show up to work. They just won't do their jobs. And the opposite is true. I mean, the company my wife works for, she's completely remote now. And I think she's probably twice as productive as she used to be because she doesn't just work her regular 9 to 5 hours anymore. There's actually extra that she does. And, it's kind of like that's a downside, I guess, maybe for workers is that they kind of have to set parameters, and maybe you can help discuss some of that in terms of work-life balance. But certainly there hasn't been a fall in productivity. The company's not making any less money than they were making before. They just have structured it differently. And I got it. I tell you, I like to have my hands on people at least once a week. But over the last couple of years, everybody I've worked with has been 100% remote, and I putting the systems in place has been a difficult piece for me. And I'd love to have you share a little bit, if you can. Like, what are the building blocks for somebody who says, hey, either I want to become more nomadic in terms of remote work, or I'm a company who wants to hire people, because we have folks like that who listen to the show too. What systems do people use in order? Because I've heard Asana, I've heard Slack, I've heard all of these different programs that people use. Is there kind of like a standard set of tools that remote workers are using that companies can easily plug into in order to access all the talent that you guys have?
So throwing around a bunch of technologies, I can tell you that we ourselves, we use Slack, and we use Basecamp, and we use Zoom. Kind of in perfect synchronize. I like the concept that in Slack you have an asynchronous discussion, and the second that you want to have synchronous discussion, do slash Zoom, and you pop up into Zoom. So it feels like you're going to the conference room.
Hmm.
But I'm a very goal-oriented with my advice. I like to not dictate what process you should take, but where you should go. What is it that you're accomplishing by trying to achieve a good, productive work environment, remote work environment, and the focus the focus of what technology you use is to try to take all the positive things that came from the office working environment and remove all the not so good things. Not so good things, I'm referring specifically to distractions. By the way, you were saying before that people see an increase in productivity with remote work. But yes, but it's not just because remote work is so much productive, is people are not admitting the real truth that office work is not productive at all. The science shows that a person, an average Joe, delivers about 2 hours and 53 minutes of work in an 8-hour shift. Right.
That's in an office environment?
In an office environment. Average, I'm not saying...
Is that just because they're going to the break room, they're going to the water cooler, they're going to somebody else's desk, they're futzing around on Facebook? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
So that can happen in a remote environment also. What really happens is distraction. Every time that you get distracted, it takes you 20 minutes to come back to focus. So every time that your boss calls you into a meeting, that is insanely distracting. The fact that you need to stop work at lunch and at 5 o'clock because you don't want to miss on the happy hour or fish and chips lunch with the boys and the gals, right? That is incredibly distracting. The every time somebody taps on your shoulder and goes and say, hey, did you see the last movie? You know the new Top Gun movie was pretty good, right? That thing takes 20 minutes away from you. So if you actually calculate how many times you get distracted in a day, you multiply it by those 20 minutes, you're going to see it takes pretty much most of your day away,
So you're
right?
oh yeah. So what you're saying is it's not just the fact that people are working tend to work maybe longer in remote work because there's not a shut off time like there would be if you're punching a clock, but that actually distractions are fewer. Well, I find that to be true. My wife, I haven't worked at a real job in like 15 years, 20 years. So I don't even remember what it was like to work in an office, but she does, and she used to say, "Man, we were always going to the break room. You're always going to the break room. You're always like talking to people's desks." It's like now she sits in her office downstairs and works at her office by herself, and she said, "Man, I just get so much more done in a day than I used to." So that makes sense to me.
I mean, how many times for your listeners, when they think about work, they should ask themselves, how many times do they go to their office? The overachievers of your listeners, some people just 9 to 5 and they're happy, and that's great. But the overachievers, how many times they go extra early to work or come in the weekend to work just to have a piece of quiet
Mm.
of working time? If you do that, it's because you subconsciously realize that you like non-distracting working hours.
Hmm.
And here at home or in your co-working space, you're in full control of the distraction, right? You are, and this is actually the secret why remote is more productive. Right, but if you're not able to create a remote environment without distraction, the results are the same at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. So then let's say that there is somebody, the listeners, because we have many of them, especially the younger listeners who are trying, they recognize the value in this. They don't want to be tethered to an office. And they realize, hey, I'm probably gonna have to learn some new skills to make myself really valuable to the remote world, at least at this stage of remote work. What are the best industries, the best skills that one can acquire in order to be in high demand in a purely remote environment?
Coding.
Coding.
It's pretty straightforward. I am a, you know, the coders, the world, a big chunk of the world of coders has finally accepted. I mean, I know that Google and the big boys still trying to create this incredible working culture where you have happy hours and beanbags and ping pong, all this nonsense to compensate for the fact that they're uprooting families from their cities and town to move to those headquarters, which nobody talks about, which is a complete crisis, by the way. This concept of forced move for job, but I for the rest of the medium-sized companies, it's becoming an accepted aspect that the coders don't need your office.
Is there any specific
Actually,
type
vice
of
versa.
coding? I feel like it changes all the time, but what I hear now is like, well, for database stuff, you could use Python, but is there any specific language that you find is people are always asking for?
It changes all the
Yeah.
time. Python is a big deal right now. Front end developers has been a big deal in the past 5 years. Um, front end front end used to be the biggest nonsense. 20 years ago, it was just putting piece of graphic on the back end code. But these days, the user experience has become so valuable that it really required some intensive coding.
So
So
you mean
there's
wait,
never
wait?
enough front end.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Front end is UI UX sort of development, like how it looks. Yeah.
front front end is the coding. It's not the creative person. It's the
Okay.
coding of the UI UX, right? It's also the creative, but the creative also always exists. The people that need to make beautiful design. Those are unique skills
Yeah.
to find people really can. Uh, those are almost advertisement people,
Hmm.
right? But the front end coder is the person who creates um, the front end code, the front end experience that 15 years ago did not require much coding. It was just HTML and a lot of creativity.
Mhm.
And these days, to maneuver probably through a software or through a website requires some serious programming to have a nice experience.
Yeah, so
And
user experience is
front end is
becoming
huge.
so user experience is becoming really well, and well, I've been trying to of loosely trying to to find a group of coders that I can work with to develop a real remote package, because like you said, you've got all of these different service, you've got Slack, you've got all these different ones that you use, and I think that there's enough stuff out there that you could kind of put it into a program that would be really good for a guy like me, small business who's hiring several remote people and in and out all the time. But you're right. One of the things that I'm noticing is getting the UI functioning correctly. So just making it the interface easy to use. And then secondly, finding somebody who can then make it do what you imagine and what you've drawn out on paper or on Figma is an incredibly complicated process, way more complicated than I thought it would be.
Yeah, look, listen, I'm not, you were asking before the technologies. I'm not providing such huge insight. Slack and Zoom work the best, right? I had an insight for this 10 years ago when we did research with all bunch of conferencing tool and this little tiny company called Zoom. We put in a top of our list. You should see an old article in my media company, Think Remote, right? We did do this 10 years ago, but we haven't changed. Zoom is
Yeah.
still the best experience. And the fact that there's just a simple plugin on Slack that just let me go to Zoom, right? It gives me that real-time experience. The investment in technology that you're trying to achieve, whatever, and it will change every 3 months, is to come as close as possible to real physical experience.
Yes. Yep.
This is the most important thing. I in my company, I actually, instead of focusing on the Zoom and the Slack, I'm focusing on the headset and the quality of internet. And if your house has too many thick walls, mesh network, to make sure that me having a conversation with you through the webcam every day is not exhausting.
Mhm.
A lot of people are talking about Zoom fatigue or uh, uh, the Zoom fatigue. I actually had a different name for it, which kind of disappeared from my tongue. But the reason why there's Zoom fatigue is not the fact that you're using Zoom all day. It's the fact that there's small micro distractions, latency, a little scratch. I can't hear you very well. All that exhausts your brain. If you can make sure that everybody in your company, starting with yourself, has the highest quality communication tools, which are so cheap, that is already a step forward in getting that Zoom, that remote experience up to level. I mean, until we get those hologram technologies or
Yeah.
the virtual reality experiences, which are shit right now. Pardon my language, right?
You're fine.
Um, the for now, your focus is get a Jabra Platronic headset. Don't get garbage, right? Make sure that your internet is the package is 2 packages above what you think you should be getting. And the company should be compensating you for that,
Yeah.
right? It's only 10, $20 extra. It's really not a big deal, right? Make sure that you have the right lighting, $30 Amazon lighting, all those small things to make you look like you are in a physical experience. And then you go and you try to have your chat and your web conferencing tool also easy breezy. That little plugin between Slack and Zoom that I have that I can immediately go /Zoom and we pop up in Zoom in 3 seconds. That breeze, that ease of use is what makes the remote experience not exhausting. And
Well,
that's where you really want to achieve.
yeah, no, and it's funny as you were talking. I was thinking to myself, that's really good advice for somebody who wants to work remote to make those investments, just simply because they're going to make it easier on the employer, the person who's hired them to do the work. It's going to be a much more enjoyable experience for them as well, which is repeat business, continued contract renewals, those types of things are highly likely if the experience is easy and you have made it as easy on them as you can.
I always explain to my employees, don't make me regret wanting to talk to you. Right. This is important, right? So if you're a person that every time I come on Zoom, it is exhausting, right? So it starts with subconscious avoidance. I don't want to talk, and it becomes eventually conscious avoidance. It's like, oh my God, every time I talk to Bob, he doesn't understand me. I don't understand him. We don't have, and on top of it, there's massive latency and scratches back in it, and I just can't handle this, right? And so whether it's subconscious or conscious, you want to avoid talking to Bob, and Bob is the one that get penalized in the long run because he or she are not clear.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, I imagine there are probably countries that are better for this type of thing, and places where you both would like to recruit from, and where people tend to gravitate. Do you kind of have a bead on where you find the best talent, or where you find that most remote people are moving to in order to get the best, I guess, the best combination of tax and freedom and internet speeds and all of that?
So those are two completely separate questions. One question is where are the best people to find? So the best people are not people that are moving to another place. It is a local people in specific area. And then I would my go-to place for a long time was Ukraine. Unfortunately, it's not a 100% reality right now. Now, the new places in the world are Argentina and Brazil. Those are good sources, but in general, it's Eastern Europe and Latin America, right? Um,
Is there a reason
Now,
for that? Is it because they're educated and they have good internet speeds in those part of the country? And is that what it is, or is it? But they're
I don't
relatively cheap.
I don't think it has anything to do with internet speeds. I
Okay.
think that anybody anywhere can buy a pipe, a proper pipe. Just people are being cheap about it, right? It costs more in certain places. It costs less, unless you're in middle of nowhere shithole,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I allowed to swear in this?
Yeah. You
In
could
this?
swear. It's fine.
Okay,
Don't worry
okay,
about it.
okay, got it. I just want to make sure because I swear sometimes a little
No,
bit, and I just
that's
I
fine.
want to be
We're all
right.
grown ups here.
Okay, good. So unless you really find in the middle of nowhere, most people, internet is not an excuse anymore.
Yeah.
Industry, right, and education and infrastructure is, right? So when a country has already industry that employs people, that they get exposure, that they get experience, that is one thing. Second of all, education that comes in countries. In Ukraine, the education, I mean, they beat the living poop out of people to get smarter there, right? And it is definitely a place that demands people to be more educated, to more analytical. So, and which is frequent in most Eastern European countries. Actually, it is interesting that in most of the coding languages, they actually did research which are the top 5 countries, and every in every programming language, at least 2 out of the 5 are Eastern European countries.
Hmm.
Random, the different languages, different platform, different countries. The United States, with all the Silicon Valley and all the great stuff, did not make it on any of those lists,
Wow.
right? So they're just better there.
Yeah.
They have infrastructure. They get educated better. They they create those economies around it, and that's what you get. It is about infrastructure. It's about education. That's the focus.
Did India not make? Does India not make the list? Like, I think in the back of our minds as Americans, we think India is like they're the ones stealing all of the tech jobs, and because they just work for peanuts and they're highly educated.
Okay, so first of all, so again, you asked two very hotted topics here. You're getting to the politics of offshoring and remote and outsourcing.
Yeah.
First of all, people losing jobs to Indians, right, or Eastern Europeans or anybody is complete bullshit. People do not understand the laws of economics where there is, if you go to India, because India is the true symbolism of outsourcing, right? When I started my first office in India, um, I noticed that Nike and McDonald's and Levi's were popping everywhere. So really, what's happening is that the jobs that you're giving to India and improving their economy means that they're consuming more. And they're consuming North American products, which brings back jobs to the North America. So all the people that lost the jobs to India, you never ask them 3 years later where they are, and they're probably in a better manager role,
Well,
right?
I don't. Here's the thing. When I look at that and I hear that from people, to me, what that says is that's competition. And now instead of local competition or national competition, you have international competition. And if you don't want people stealing your jobs, get better skills. That's why people stop learning, they stop growing and improving, and then they're shocked in 5 10 years when somebody halfway around the world will do their job for a tenth of what they're willing to do it for. So, I mean, I say that just because I would have assumed that India would be really high on the list in terms of tech competency and places you would go. But the downside to that, like hiring virtual assistants from the Philippines or tech guys from India, I hired a team one time from Romania to do some coding for me on a web app. Other than the Romanians, which were really good communicators, at least their firm was, everybody else, communication was such a difficult thing. You talk about just language barrier stuff. They might have been really good at what they did, but I think that may be something that holds companies back too, or is that something that you find is true?
So I don't remember if I read this in a Malcolm Gladwell book or a Freakonomics book, but there was a story about um, the airline in South Korea, which again I don't remember the name of the airline, but for in the in the 80s in the 80s or 90s, that airline would literally crash. I mean, South Korea is a rich country, but it would be like the airline, you would think you were getting into a third world country airline because they would crush disproportionately more than anybody else.
Mhm.
And they it took them, they went, and then they got an American consultant CEO to come in and to find out what's going on. And what they discovered was that the co pilot did not feel comfortable criticizing the pilot. And that and I mean, in North American standard and Westernized standard, the co-pilot is there to bust the chops
Yeah.
of the pilot the moment that he sees something wrong, and as a team they eliminate errors. That was not the case. This is the challenge with South Asia. The culture is so different, right? Smart people, generous people. I love India, I love Philippines. That just the nobody went to them and said you can't just say yes on everything, right? And it it truly affects it, it truly affects their interaction with North American people. I'm not saying they're not great. I'm not saying that they don't have amazing, talented developers and programmers. The culture is so different that it truly handicaps them.
Mm.
And they're such proud people that every time I went as a consultant and to I try to deliver it in the nicest, softest way possible, and they just got offended, and I just it just it's not easy for me to recruit from India
Yeah.
because of it. I try so hard, and clients come to me and say, we don't want, right? We don't want that. So, yes, the Indian market is great. It's a multi-billion-dollar outsourcing industry. You want cheap labor outsourcing, no problem. You want cheap customer service. You want Philippines, they're all fluent in English. But for the hardcore stuff, it's tough. It's tough,
Wow.
and it's hard for me to admit in a podcast because I love those cultures, and I sound like another white racist asshole,
No,
right? And
I don't
I'm
think that at all. I mean,
right.
that's having a fair
Yes,
conversation about the difference between in culture and the hiccup that it's causing in terms of folks getting winning contracts and getting jobs in that part of the world. I hate the idea that you've got to like tiptoe around stuff like that so somebody doesn't accuse you of being a racist. That to me is those are important things to understand on both sides of the fence, whether you're looking to hire or you're looking to get a job. It's important that you understand that the nuances of where you're getting your support from.
yes. Look, I'm very hypersensitive about
Hmm.
it because in my company, it really is all about diversity. It is all about um, the strength of our company. At the end of the day, it's all the progressive all the progressives ideas out there, making sure that your company is diversified as possible, have as many women in power and people are part of the LGBTQ community.
Hmm.
So we're hypersensitive, and people for that people seem to absolutely love working in the company because they see that um, there is a boss and a leadership team that actually care about the social emotional aspect. This is how I keep people very, very productive. They just love the work and love the company. We didn't get into company culture, but that's a big thing, and that's why I'm always very careful with my language when it comes to that.
Yeah, well, and we can touch on that too. I want to. What I heard, one of the things I heard you say as you were talking about America and how they just don't show up on the top 10 of any of these countries that have
It was
this
the top five.
top
Top
five.
five.
Okay,
Maybe they're number seven falling now,
okay.
but that list
Well,
they
they
didn't show
should
up on
be,
any of them.
again, like anything else. They should be at the top of the list with the money and education and opportunities that they have here. So, I mean, that's a potential opportunity for somebody who really wants to devote themselves to becoming valuable. Because I would imagine that it probably is really hard to find somebody who's competent at that high level who also speaks, fluent English or at least is a native speaker, and to find
Yeah.
that would make you an even greater asset to a potential employer or contractor. So talk to me about, let's say somebody wants to do this, and let's assume that they have acquired the skills or will. How do they get started? I mean, how does Distant Jobs or distantjob.com help them find those contracts and connect them up? How's the process work?
So we function like every other recruitment agency out there. We're just a really, really skilled in remote environment. What I would recommend once the person has the skills, right, that are in demand, and let me tell you, the demand for coders doubles every 5 years, right? So it is there's no luck to jobs anywhere, right? You just make sure you're a good coder and I understand how to do it properly. But after that, you you need after that you need to start making your not CV, your LinkedIn actually seem as appealing as possible. Discussing as much as possible what value are you generating for the client. Add a video showing add a video to what you're doing. Show that you are um, a real contributor. You better be on some of the platform that share coding and creating showing that you're an authority. And after that, I believe that most recruitment agencies, if not companies directly, would want to hire you, right? And when you have solid coding skills, these days you can finally get a remote job. It was not the case 3 years ago,
Hmm.
but you can apply and you say, look, I'm in Canada or I'm in New York for a Californian company. I can't operate my family, but this is the stuff that I can bring to your company.
So it's really
Somebody would
just
look at
okay.
that CV.
So it's really just a matter of you gaining the skills and then addressing. It's funny that you say go to LinkedIn rather than your CV. Is that LinkedIn in many ways is your CV? Like your social
It
media
is.
presence is your job resume, and that's yeah. So that's amazing.
Well, the online CV, which is LinkedIn, gives you the ability to add a lot more links. The more links that you have for credentials to like being part of a quarter community, there's multiple of them being um, showing that you are a person that your personality is part of a team. People want team workers in the coding world. That's why it's so important for them to have in office. So to show that as a remote person, you'll be extremely involved and not disappear and experience working remotely and adding some real values for your previous projects.
Is that a hard
That's
thing to do? I mean, are most? I would think that. I mean, I can code a little bit of Python, HTML, CSS. Like I've learned to do that over the years, but I'm no coder. I find that most of the people that I've worked with tend to be fairly introverted. They like to kind of be siloed and do their own thing. Do you find it's hard to get coders who are outgoing and want to work on a team and are in like that team environment?
So that is actually the differentiator, right? So don't make a mistake about it. You're an excellent code, you're introverted. Chances are people will want to hire you and you just need to negotiate. these days, it's these days it's a quarters market. It is a place where you can go. If you're awesome, you're in demand, people will need you, right? You will find a job, in my opinion. The key is to negotiate, is to get two good jobs, and to say to them, I'm going to go with the other one if you're not going to give me a remote job, right? So the market at this moment is very much an introverted market.
Hmm.
If you can sell yourself as an extrovert, even if you're an introvert, that would be incredibly beneficial. Actually, I write in my book that the most productive people are introverted, but introverted,
Hmm.
right? But the problem is that managers and employers are still thinking old school. They've not moved to what they still believe that office work, even if it produces 2 hours and 53 minutes, they're still delusional to think they're great. Even worse, there's still companies who bring all their team into cubicle environment, even the management. I've never seen something a bigger crisis, right, in work environment than having your biggest producers sitting beside a junior and hearing each other distracting them all day, right? Crisis. So the problem is the management at the end of the day, that they don't get it. So, and a lot of people until today, when they give you a remote job, they want something in return, right? Or they want cheap labor, which you don't want to sell yourself as cheap
Hmm.
labor because, or they want you to show that you add some exceptional value on top of the person that they think they can hire inside the office. So even if you're introverted, which I believe introverts are bigger productive, there is research on this. If you give them the opportunity, if you don't damage that work environment that they have, if you want to push for a remote job, you better show some management skills and some extroverted skills. And once you get the gig, you can go back to probably coding, right? And as long as you code well and you produce code, nobody's going to bug you and you're going to be just fine. But you want raises and bonuses and everything in jobs. That comes, unfortunately, with an extrovert reality or the perception of extrovertness.
Do you think it's ever going to get to a point where most work is done remotely unless you literally have to be on site to do something? Or do you think that there's always going to be this push to get people to show up? Well, I mean, and once you've got a virtual reality or artificial or AR that simulates a real world environment to the point that it's ostensibly the same thing. Are we gonna keep getting closer and closer to that sort of nomadic world, or are you seeing that? I feel like there's a little bit of a pullback, which is why I asked the question. I feel like right after COVID, everybody was like, nah, screw it, stay home. We're gonna do remote. And then slowly but surely, like, now 2 days a week, 3 days a week, Monday and Friday, we want you in the office, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we want you in the office. What is your bead on that in the people you talk to, the companies?
In my opinion, and I don't have enough science to back up, so it is an opinion. I think that this is a losing battle, the fight against remote. It's just not possible. Every company, everyone, especially in the technology industry, which is in the most demand of people, will get the shock when they fight, when they lose their best programmer, right? When they lose their suddenly 10 real producers, and you're like, I guess I can't fight this, right? Because somebody else is saying, I don't care. You want to work remote? Fine. I need good coders,
Yeah.
right? Somebody will say that. Right now, it's 15, 20% of the tech world. It's a losing battle.
Yeah.
I have multiple friends, as I like to call them, super geeks or super nerds, right? They get paid a lot of money. And the second you'll tell them to go to the office right now, they will start looking for another job.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
second, right? So some of the top coders, some of the top producers in the world love remote, and they know how to
Well, and
polish
it's
their CV.
And it's funny. It's not just that. I said my wife works in staffing and recruiting for Hollywood, and she does primarily the people who do graphic design work and great posters and artwork for stuff. And so that's very temporary work. It's 3 months, it's 6 months, and then they're on to another film with another company. And so they're doing a lot of. And she's having the same issue there. She's like, we cannot. The best graphic designers, the best I don't know what you call them, like people who put these posters together and stuff. They refuse to come in. They just won't do it. And if you want them, you got to take them remote. And since there are very few people, like kind of like coding, it's like there's more jobs than there are really qualified people to do them. They're winning that battle, and she's having to have probably the same conversation you're having with employers, which is, look, you're not going to get these guys. They're not coming in. They won't do it. You've got to adjust if you want them to come and work for you. And to me, that's an exciting thing. That's the little guy having kind of a say in how they're going to direct their own lives and how they're going to work and when they're going to work. And that is having that kind of power is a rare thing for the employee to have.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And the old school. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and to your point, like, just be really good at what you do. Be good at it, and it won't matter. Like, you'll be able to call your own shots.
That is the secret. At the end of the day, and unfortunately, the majority of people are not super awesome at what they do. They just do regular things. So that's a challenge. Mm-hmm. I don't have perfect answer for that. I'm in the business of finding the best of the best, right? Which gives me very challenging to answer question. What if you're just a person without any special skills? Still can try to find a remote job. You can still apply. You can still create a perception of quality. But at the end of the day, it is about the guys with the huge skills. Mm-hmm. And I think that in 20, 30 years, the old school mentality, they're just going to retire, right? And the new generation, those coders, their superstar coders, will become the future CTOs, and they will remember exactly that they like to work from home, mm-hmm. right? So I personally think it's unavoidable. I think this is the reality.
I agree with you. Well, so thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was super insightful. Tell everybody about where the website. Tell them about the book. Just give your plugs so that people who are really interested and want to know more can find you.
Perfect. So please, if you want some of the best talents the world has to offer in the IT world, come to Distant Job. You can reach me directly. It's Sharon, spelled like Sharon, but Sharon at distantjob.com, right? Or come to the website. You're going to get an exceptional service. If you want to learn more about how to manage remote people, how to work remote people, or you can come to our online media company, online magazine called thinkremote.com. Or you can read my book, a bestseller book, Surviving Remote Work, that will teach you everything that you, at least a solid introduction, how to get your remote team to be super productive. I mean, this is what it's all about, happiness and productivity, right? And we are offering the solution for that. So just Surviving Remote Work or Think Remote, you will get all of that information.
Sharon, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate you being here. Guys, that's going to do it for this week. We'll see you back on Monday. Until then, be safe. Be good. I'll talk to you then.